Thank you for using the chat box. I got a quick poll. Make sure that's working today. So let me share a quick poll. The poll today is this. Have you had a chance to attend this webinar before? So you should see on your screen. Is this your first time? No, actually, I've attended earlier this year, or it's been a while. It may have been last year that you had a chance to attend these webinars. Just to kind of give you what they are about. For all of our graduates of our building business acumen type programs, whether it's applying business acumen for sales, business acumen for HR leaders, etc. This is a follow-on learning experience that allows them to take the tools they got in the course itself and practice using them by listening to these earnings calls. It's also open to people who have never graduated from our program as a way to kind of get more comfortable around engaging and listening around these earnings calls. How do I take a lot of information, kind of condense it into little bite-sized pieces that I can actually do something about that? And so that's what we hold these. Every month we do a different company. This month we're doing Visa. If you're with us last month, we had Saudi Aramco. And then here in December, it'll be kind of early in December, earlier than normal. We're going to do a Bear. So get a chance to get 3 different industries there. Well, looks like many of you, it's your first time. Well, hopefully you're graduates. Thank you for joining. My recommendation is engage list 2 to 3 times after your session, and it really will help build your capabilities around the tools and resources today. Well, you're coming to a course where we're going to talk about how to listen to an earnings call. So I've got to ask a question, and the question I want to ask is, let's get some clarity around when's the last time you've listened to an earnings call? Just on the chat box, in the voting, when's the last time you listened to a call? You're coming to learn how to do it. Have you never listened to them? I've done a lot of them. This year I've done multiple ones, Brent. It's been a long time. Or for some of you, hey, I'd rather go get a root canal, go to the dentist or something like that as you look at these. These earnings calls happen on a quarterly basis, and I consider them a hidden gem. There are resources available for everybody to access. And it's a great way to understand business, to understand your business if you're publicly traded, to understand a company you might be selling into. If you work with a publicly traded company, you provide products or goods for them. I can't think of a better thing than on a quarterly basis to quickly hear what they're talking about. So then when you go to communicate and speak to how your company's products or service will drive their success, you're able to really make a business case, be able to articulate how your partnership will drive their key metrics, how it will drive their strategic objectives. It's a great way. And another way to use it would be if you're just looking to invest in a company. I want to get more understanding about the company I'm investing in. These are all great ways to use these earnings calls. Well, looks like many of you have had a chance to do it. About 14%. Well, my goal today is hopefully to inspire you enough to say, you know what? I'm going to take Brent up on his challenge. I'm going to actually take this tool, and in the next month or two, I'm going to use it by listening to an earnings call. Now, that could be the company you're working with. It could be a company you're selling into. It could be a company you compete with. If I'm a smaller business, I can look at a company, maybe a flagship company in the industry. I want to kind of see what they're talking about as I'm a newcomer to the industry, kind of see what that kind of benchmark company's doing and how I'm performing around metrics, what I could do to drive to those same goals and objectives. Or from an investment perspective, you may want to look at that. Well, as you look at these earnings calls, kind of what's the purpose? Why do they do them? Well, there's some challenges that businesses face today. Here's a stat that comes from Harvard Business Review that we shared before on this call, maybe new to some of you. As you look at this, 95% of employees don't understand company strategy. Now, I'm not saying that that's where you are as a learner or as an employee of an organization. This comes from a Harvard business study where they found 95% of employees don't understand their company strategy. Now, here at Acumen Learning, we've had a great chance to work with 34 of the Fortune 50, many of the Fortune 500, work with some of the best companies in the world. Here's what we see working with these companies. We see that our senior leaders of these organizations are doing everything they can to drive financial performance, generate more cash for the company, drive profitability for the organization, get greater utilization of their assets, drive growth, and really engage with their customers, external, as well as really get a team coming together to execute. What we find with our employees is that employees are functionally brilliant. You're very good at what you do. You know more about your role than I would ever understand about your role. That being said, we often kind of go through our careers very focused on our role. I'm in HR. I'm in accounting. I'm in operations. We get very well versed in our key operational metrics, But then when we step back and we go to maybe a town hall meeting, or maybe you get a chance to listen to these calls, you're hearing metrics like cash flow, free cash flow, EBITDA, return on invested capital, debt to equity ratios, coverage ratios. And you find yourself stepping back from time to time and say, what the flip is that? How should I think about this? How can I use this? And so what happens is we don't engage around these calls. We don't get clarity around that vision. So I'm making decisions based upon my functional role, where sometimes they may or may not be aligned with the organization. Well, here's another stat that's kind of sobering for companies today. 90% of employees don't understand companies' important business metrics. Now imagine that you're CEO of a company. If these stats are correct, 95% not understanding your strategy, and 90%, I like to think of the metrics as kind of like a scoreboard. 90% of your employees aren't keeping score. They don't know for sure, are you really winning or not? They might even hear you're doing well, and the colleague comes to them and says, hey, can you tell me anything, how can you explain that we are doing well? And they say, well, because I was told we're doing well. But be able to look at the metrics and say, yeah, actually, I'm seeing growth. I'm seeing strength of our financial position, et cetera. Well, imagine you're a CEO of a company like Visa. Mr. McInerney just came in. He became the CEO in 2023. So he's a new CEO in the company. He's been with the company before, but a new CEO in the last year or so. You got 34.9 billion of net revenue last year. Pretty sizable organization. You're working across over 160 currencies. Look at that, 13.2 trillion in payment volume. I mean, those transactions, the value of those transactions, about $13.2 trillion of payment volume going through their system. About 31,000 plus employees. 11.5 billion network, what they call tokens, different, it kind of speaks to each kind of credit card or kind of how people transact, whether it's through credit card, direct account to account, etc. You got all those employees. The question is, what is it you're trying to help them understand? Now, what's interesting about their model is it's a very unique model. One of the most profitable business models I look at as a company. Now, here's their model. This comes from their annual report. It's very simply, they are going to make a connection between the consumer buying a product or good and that transaction of money electronically, physically, etc., and the merchant who's selling something. Through this, what they call Visa Net, this flow of cash, right? You walk into a grocery store, you go to buy something, you transact. Well, they take that money from you, from the issuer, from your bank, et cetera, goes through Visa Net, goes through the acquirer, goes to Walmart or whatever, and they get that transaction. They kind of own that process. Now, what's involved in that process? Well, obviously, there's security issues, right? Making sure that there's no fraudulent transactions happening. Making sure that you can go across the 160 currencies. But basically, they're a connection point between the seller and the buyer and how that money transacts. Well, as you look at their numbers, they're some of the best numbers I've seen. As you look at some of their numbers, look at this. So last year, they generated $35 billion of revenue, right? Almost 36. You look right here, their operating income, 23 billion. That's actually a 65% margin, actually almost 66% margin. What that's saying is for every $100 they bring in their company, they're generating about $66 of profitability from their core operations. You go down here to net income, that's about a 55% margin. Just to give you a kind of a range, typically your S&P 500, kind of on a low end would be kind of that 10%, and it's been as high as 12% in the last couple of years, so somewhere in that range. They're looking at like 5 times that as far as profitability, the net profit margin. You look at their growth numbers. Their top line growth is up 12%. Then you look at their profitability here. You're up about 12 point. Excuse me. You're about 10% growth here and about 12% growth down here. So you look at this company, very unique model, very successful in what they do. Yet you got these challenges of 95% of employees potentially may not understand your core strategies. Globally dispersed. 90% of your employees don't understand how to keep score. Well, the question really becomes then, what is it you want your employees to know? These calls are helping to communicate to the employees. But also, what is it you want your customers to know? These calls are very strategically focused towards your shareholders. What is it you want your shareholders to know, analysts, et cetera? And then partnerships. Well, that's what I want to walk you through is how to take these calls and kind of make get a good understanding of what's going on. If you look at what we're going to look at, their fiscal year ended end of October is when it ended. Excuse me, end of September. Their call was at the end of October. So their fiscal year ends at the end of October. Their new year starts in Q4 and the calendar year. So we got a full years of information. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to walk you through this tool. Just kind of engage through the discussion. And here's my guarantee. Having been doing this for about 14 years, here's what I can promise you. As you take this tool and you go look at your company, if you're publicly traded, if you're selling, go look at a customer that's publicly traded. If you are, I just want to understand investment strategies. Here's my guarantee. As you do this the next 2 to 3 quarters consecutively, or with us through these webinars, the next two to 3 months consecutively, actually go through, use the tool. It absolutely will build your credibility. It's going to build your career, and it's going to drive your company's success. So I want to walk you through a basic process, 3-step process. I'm going to give you a simple framework and 2 tools. That's what we're going to discuss in our remaining time today. So let's jump in that first step of the process where we talk about preparation. Now, if you haven't been engaged around these calls or kind of new to you, let me give you kind of earnings call 101. They happen on a quarterly basis. They're not required by law to provide these experiences. That being said, something like 90+% of companies will do it. The only companies that I typically see that don't is those early startups. They may not do that as they're first getting out the door, but most companies by far are going to do these calls. Now, they're not regulated. They're not required. What's required of these publicly traded companies? They have to get information to the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, around their financial performance, around kind of how they performed, why their revenue's going up, why it's going down, what's called the management discussion analysis. They got to get notes to the finance. They have to submit that. On an annual basis, that submission is called a 10K. On a quarterly basis, the submission is called a 10Q. So as we're looking at the full year of Visa, this is going to be their 10K. Well, rather than just submit that information, they want a chance to communicate to the market, to communicate to analysts, investors, employees, et cetera, what's going on, kind of where they are, where they want to go, and how they're going to get there. So the start of these calls, you have the initial probably short would be 15 minutes, long would be upwards of an hour of a prepared remarks, where typically you're going to have their CEO and their CFO kind of communicate their performance. Then somewhere, usually about halfway through the process, they're going to switch. And you're going to have a Q&A. Now, the Q&A is not you and I asking questions. These are analysts, those analysts working for major investment firms like Fidelity, Wells Fargo, Barclays, all these big investment firms, right? That are tracking their stock. So there's a whole group of analysts that track Visa, American Express, MasterCard. So they're tracking all these credit cards. They listen to the calls, then they write a report. They make a recommendation to their investors. Hold, sell, or buy is the most common. There's other ones, but those are the most common. So that's what happens on these calls. So as you go to these calls, here's the first thing you got to do is prepare for that call. 3 things you got to do. Number 1, you got to locate the call. Now, as you look at this call, let me kind of show you how to locate this call by jumping over here to this wonderful website. We're going to look at, this is our website. It wasn't bragging there. We're going to go to Google. Not Google Maps. Holy cow. I thought I had this set up. Google.com. New website for some of us, maybe. I don't know. Just kidding. All you're going to do is come in here and ask for what you want to get access to. So I'm going to type in Visa, maybe annual report 2024. Look, it's already done. You could put in earnings call. You could do Q4 earnings call. So if I did like a Q4 earnings call, it's going to pull up information for you. So you go and click on that, and immediately it comes up with Visa's investor relations page. Now you can go to their page, you can navigate to their investor relations page, but I'm going to jump right here, and I can already see Q4 full year. I know that that's what I'm looking for. So I jump here, I've got all the information. Here's the webcast. I click on that. It actually is going to give me the recording. Here's the press release. Press releases are a great little summary of what they kind of want to highlight in the earnings call. They often will put that out just before the call, so it gives you a little bit of information before you jump in the call. Now, all the Visas, the MasterCards, they do a great job of putting together some great slides. They'll give you a little overview of information they want to highlight. Some operational performance data, that's where they're kind of focused on some key metrics they want to share. And then this is really valuable to me. It's called the transcript. This is literally word for word what they said in the webinar. Now, I often don't listen to the call itself just because I'm busy. So what I do is I get the transcript and I'll read through it. Sometimes I'll listen to it while I'm reading through it, and I kind of go through that analysis. Now, if it's prior to the call, you're not going to see all this information. So this happened on the 29th. They, within usually 24 to 48 hours, they put all this information on their website. If it was before the call, what you would typically see is you would see just the webcast. You click on it and you can actually register for it. Then they'll send you a little invite, how to log in, and you can listen to it. Now, you'll be muted. They won't be able to interact with you. You're just going to listen to it. But that's a great way to access that. So any publicly traded company you want to look at, that same process. Go into the company, just if you want just their quarterly information, annual information, do the name of the company, what quarter you're looking for, and it'll give you access to that. So the first thing you got to do is access the call itself. So let's jump back to where I was here. As we look at that, we want to locate the call. The next step is you're going to review your notes. Now, as you look at reviewing your notes, you might say, Brent, what do you mean by that? Well, if you've already done this a couple of times, you go back to this tool I'm going to give you and you review your notes. If it's your first time, you could go right back to Visa's website, type in Q3 and get a nice summary of what happened in Q3. Or if you want to look at a year ago, 2023's Q4 information, you could do that as well. So you kind of see where were they communicating? So when you listen to the call, you can kind of assess a little bit. Did I see growth? Did I see what they said they were going to do actually happen? The last thing that I recommend in this prepare phase is to do this with your teammate, to do it with a colleague, peer, direct reports. It's a great way, especially if it's your company, to come together on a quarterly basis. Let's step back as a function and say, what is our executive team talking about? Based upon what they're talking about, what is it you and I can do within this function to drive our company's goals, objectives, etc. So I highly recommend that as a process in the prepared phase. Folks, that's the prepared phase. The majority of the work happens in this next phase called the analysis phase. Now, before we do that, I want to introduce you to just a simple, before I share the two tools, I want to introduce you to a simple framework. We use this in all of our programs. It's called the 5 business driver model. Think of it as a mental model, a framework. As you think about business, I'm going to suggest to you it boils down to 5 fundamental drivers. The first driver is cash, profitability, assets, growth, and people. Now, as you look at the foundation, the first 3, the foundation are the financial statements. If you want to know what's going on from a cash perspective, you're going to jump in the cash flow statement. You can see everything from how much we generated, how much we reinvested in our business, as well as how much money did we get back to investors, as well as potentially strengthen our financial position by paying down debt, holding on to cash for future investments, etc. Now, if I want to understand what's happening from a profitability perspective, I'm going to jump over here to the income statement, where it's basically your revenue or sales minus your expenses is going to equal that profitability. That's what I was showing you earlier. Visa generated $36 billion of revenue, and then their operating income was like 66%. For every $100 they brought in their company, they generated $66 of profitability. Just to give you a hint, a comparison, S&P 500 usually is somewhere around that 45%. Closer to like a 25% on an operating income number. Their net income last year, I think, was about 11.5 S&P 500, and these guys are at 55%. You can find all that out through the income statement. Now, the last statement is going to be the balance sheet. The foundation of assets is going to be a balance sheet. So here's what I want to do. In the chat box, let's just do a quick review of this statement so we can all see how to understand this statement, understand this framework as you look at the tools I'm going to give you in just a moment. So let's talk about cash. We talk about cash in a business. Fill in the blank for me. Cash is blank. What would you say? For your company, for any company, cash is absolutely king. Now let's put queen in there as well. Royalty. Ron Sharam says that cash is a company's oxygen supply. That being said, most of us don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I hope I generate more cash today. We're either trying to drive top line revenue, how we manage our costs, could be volumes of sales, volumes of productions. There's a lot of metrics, but the outcome of everything we do, it's either going to increase, it's going to potentially decrease, or kind of maintain our cash. So cash is vitally important. The key metrics companies look at there is how much cash is on hand. How much cash does a company generate? It's going to look at how quickly you're getting your cash, looking at what we call working capital, where we look at days sales outstanding, inventory turns, days payables outstanding, etc. Now, on the profitability, there's two fundamental levers every company focuses on that drives profitability. One is you're increasing a lever, the other is decreasing a lever. For those that have been in the class, if I want to grow my profitability, what do I need to increase or decrease? Put in the chat box. I love that, Paul. King, queen, the whole family. Absolutely. I want to increase the top line, which we would call that our revenue, is what Visa calls it. But it can also just be called your sales as well. That's what Walmart calls it. Now, how do I grow my revenue? Well, I can increase my price on my product or good, or I can sell more, what we call volume. Those two levers right there is what drives our revenue or sales. The second thing is, yeah, absolutely. I see it. A lot of you had it there. Cut our costs or reduce cost, right? So anything I can do to reduce my costs or total expenses. Those two levers right there in my courses, I always talk about those. I call that business 101. Those are fundamental levers. If you want to just remember that the most fundamental levers to impact business is growing your revenue while reducing your costs. It's not rocket science. You all know that, but that absolutely, that drives cash. It drives profit. All your asset utilization metrics are based upon some form of profitability, typically like your return on investment, return on equity, et cetera. What do you want to grow? You want to grow your cash, et cetera. So in the end, those two levers are fundamentally driving profitability impacts everything else in the organization. Now, from a balance sheet, you talk about what we call asset strength, how financially strong is a company versus asset utilization. How well are they deploying their assets to drive profitability? Growth is then what investors expect, and people are what drives the engine, right? Our internal customers, our colleagues, our peers, direct reports. How well are we driving each one of these other levers? That's why it's in the center. Not only that, but external customers. How well do we anticipate the customers we're working with? So this 5-driver model is a simple framework that you can use to assess both the strategic focus of a company as well as their financial performance. So that's what I want to walk you through, is those two tools that will help you to assess strategy and keep score as we talk about financial statements. So the first tool you're going to see in the toolkit I'm going to give you at the end of our program today is called the executive alignment activity. Now, I love the term activity. It means just something you can do. You can do with colleagues. It's engaging. A simple little tool to help you assess the strategic focus of the company. Here's how it works. As you listen to, let's say you decided, hey, I'm going to listen to Visa's earnings call. So you go, you get the webcast and you start playing it. Here's what you do. You grab a piece of paper and you write down cash, profit, asset growth, and people, the 5 drivers. And what you're going to do, you're going to listen for how many times are they talking about cash, profit, asset growth, and people. Now, right here in the tool itself, you can just start putting slash marks. They start talking cash, profit, assets, etc. You're just putting slash marks. You can do it up here. You can drive it and grab a piece of paper into it. So literally all you're doing in the call is listen to what are they focused on? Are they talking about cash, profit, asset growth, or people? Then at the end of the call, you're going to answer some simple questions. Which of the business drivers seem to get the most attention? And I love the second part, and why. Think about who are they talking to? What's the competitive landscape? Well, what's going on from a macroeconomic environment that might be driving their focus? Then number 2, what were the 2 or 3 main points the executive was trying to make? Number 3, what are the goals or objectives going forward? And finally, what are the key questions the analysts are asking? Now, I love the analyst question. Now, sometimes you'll get leaders in finance and accounting say, hey, don't worry about the analyst question. Just focus on the prepared remarks. I have a different opinion. Here's why. The value I get from the analyst is I get to feel, are they buying what the company's saying or are they kind of questioning it? Meaning, I can always tell if their questions are kind of aligned, saying, yes, looks like you've got good performance. I can see that. Just give me a little more color. Or are they pressure testing the company? Are they pushing back on the company? I've literally had an analyst get on a call with the company where they say, here's what you're saying your numbers are. Now, I run through the calculation. That's not what I'm getting. Help me understand. There seems to be a discrepancy. Or you keep saying this, but your numbers aren't saying that that's really what's going on in your organization. They'll really push back. And it really helps me to see how the market might view what's been communicated by the investor. So I like to look at those calls as well. Now, folks, for some of you, you're going to say to me, Brent, I've never been through a class. You did a 3-minute overview of those 5 drivers. How do I make sense of this? Well, don't worry. Right here, even if you haven't had a call, You want to know what we mean by cash? Right here, I give you a quick definition. Not only that, I give you some terms to look for that will help drive your slash mark. So, for example, I'm looking for sources and uses of cash as I look at the cash driver. So, some of those sources would be, buyback, stock buybacks, or that's a use of cash, right? Get accessing debt, that's a source of cash. Issuing stock, a source of cash. Taking cash and investing in capital projects, that's going to be cash. But guess what? And I invest in a capital expenditure, that's also going to be assets. I'm going to increase my assets, could even be growth. And as you do this, it's not an exact science, meaning if we got over 100 people on the call today, we go through this call, we won't get the exact same number of slash marks. That being said, our company does about 1,200 of these years, different companies, different industries. And invariably, as a group, we tend to rise to the top 2 or 3 drivers that everybody seems to see the companies focused on. So it's a great resource to do that. Then the last part of it is then taking that information and say, okay, so what should I do about it? So that's the tool. With that brief introduction, here's what I want to do. We're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes. I've got 2 quotes, one from our CEO, one from their CFO. And open your chat box and let's see if we can kind of describe what drivers you're seeing in this communication. So this comes from their CEO, and he says this: our fourth quarter results were very strong, with 9.6 billion in net revenue, up 12% year over year, and our earnings per share was up 16%. Put in the chat box, which of the 5 drivers do you automatically see for sure? Brian Nichols is telling me growth. Anybody else want to weigh in? So growth for sure. When I see, revenue up 12%, up 60%, you got growth. Yes, I would probably put revenue as a profit. Now, again, if I increase my revenue, assuming over time I collect that eventually becomes cash. But when I look at profit, I'm always looking for revenue. I'm looking for cost, increased pricing, lowering costs. Those are the key metrics I'm looking for. So for me, definitely growth for sure. And then as well, revenue. EPS or earnings per share, that's a profit metric. So for sure, profit there. Okay, next one. Our key business drivers were relatively stable compared to Q3. In constant dollars, overall payments volume grew 8%. What driver are we looking at here? Okay, so for sure, growth, for sure. Now the payments, really for them, payments is transactions for them. Remember, they're not necessarily, they get paid by the merchant 2.5 to 3.5% every transaction. What they're talking about is the volume of transactions going through their system. So that's what they mean by payment, which is hugely positive for them. U.S. payments volume grew 5%, and international payments volume grew 10%. Cross-border volume, excluding Europe, rose 13%, and processed transactions grew 13%. Yeah, you're starting to see a theme. Just scroll up and down the chat box. For sure, we're hearing a lot about growth in this first paragraph here. Let's look at the second paragraph. What does he say here? As I reflect on this quarter and the full fiscal year, I'm incredibly proud of the more than 31,000 Visa employees, what driver, who have been focused on delivering our strategy, enabling our clients, what driver, and compelling solutions, which resulted in the company's strong performance. What drivers are you seeing here? Hey, I like that. Vedya, I don't know if I'm saying your name right there, but absolutely assets. These compelling solutions, those are assets that they're providing for their customers. So people, for sure, both internal customers as well as external customers, as we talk about our clients, our those that use our products or services. Okay, well, let's jump over here. Now I got the CFO. I'll let you kind of scan through it. What do you see? Just put them, let's flood the chat box. What are you seeing as you read through? Put in the chat box. What are you seeing in this quote from their CFO? Also relatively new in his role. Came from, if I remember right, Chase or one of the other big financial groups. I'll just start underlining some words that stand out to me. When I see volume, that's a key trigger for me. Around profit, volume was up, growth for sure. Yeah, a lot of growth, guys. A lot of growth. Net revenue for me is going to be profit up 12%, very similar to what we just saw. above our expectation, primarily due to lower than expected incentives. So one of the big factors that takes away from their revenue is they incentivize people to get a credit card, to use their card. Stuff like if you're getting cash back, for example, on your credit card, that's an incentive that goes against the revenue they generate. Anyway, so a lot of different things that you've got here. Stronger than expected revenue, foreign exchange, that's what FX is, being less than the drag expected, net revenue up, again, earnings per share. So a lot of profit, but growth. Yes, the reduction of operating expenses, that will impact profit, and eventually that profit becomes cash. So again, as you look at it, if you're going to summarize, just scan through our chat box, what for sure seems to be one of the top ones? As you scan up and down through everything that we all said, in just two quotes, what driver do you think for sure is going to be up there? Yeah, growth. You don't have to spend much time. I mean, two quotes, and we're pretty clear on what it was. Well, if you had a chance to read through it like I did, you'd see a lot about growth. Very significant. So when you go through, this is what it might look like for you. Now, don't look at this. This is how many I should have. But this is kind of what it looks like when you look at it. And definitely, you got a lot around growth, a lot around assets and profitability were some of the higher ones there. So from there, I got kind of what I saw. Let's go through and answer the question. Now, we don't have time to have everybody answer. If you happen to do it, as I go through these questions in the chat box, just share what you saw as well. But I'm going to go through and walk through answering these questions. So the first one, which business drivers seem to get the most attention and why? Well, it's not rocket science. We all saw it in the first two quotes. Growth, 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 growth. Now, profitability, assets, all the new value chain opportunities, the new flows of opportunities that they're looking at, significant revenue growth across the groups, specifically in what they call new flows and value-added services. Increased payment volumes. Now, when you think payment volumes for them is the big, that's what they do. They transact. The payment volumes, how many times we transact with that credit card, and that process, getting the money from the customer to the merchant, that increases their revenue, right? 2.5 to 3.5%. The cross-border, think about how, getting money across different borders, different currencies. We think of them as that technology, but there's all sorts of regulatory requirements, security, fraudulent kind of protection they have to put in to be able to transact across different borders. They're expanding their ecosystem through partnerships and innovations like Visa Direct, tap to pay, account to account capabilities. Growth was critical as Visa aims to capitalize on opportunities in consumer payments. That's a big part of their revenue. Business to business transactions and value added service. In addition, they celebrate surpassing their target. New flows and value added service contributing more than 30% of their net revenue. Now, what are some of those kind of examples you think about value added and what do they mean by that? New flows is kind of that business to business transactions, account to account. We've all kind of put our banking where the direct deposit, direct transactions with customers. Well, what if you could do that with your credit card, right? Rather than have to place your credit card, it's actually transacting directly with your bank account through a Visa capability. Government disbursements, being able to do that. Some of the value-added services they talk about, it's a lot about fraud prevention and security. In fact, they made a big investment in an AI on-demand kind of fraud tracking system that they acquired a company that has that capability. All the data analytics, consulting services that Visa can provide as other value-added resources. So a lot of growth going on in the company. You can see in their numbers. In fact, their margins are also getting better. So very strong performance as you look at this growth driver. So what were the two or three messages? Well, they kind of align with that a little bit. As you look at some of these growth numbers here, payment volumes, international, you see some real growth around credit and debit, pretty flat. But even these, they're slightly up. It's showing a 5%, but if you actually look at their numbers, it's like less than 1% growth year over year. But overall, you look at the whole group, what you're seeing from a growth perspective. You look at some other numbers that are interesting. Total payment volumes are up. And then finally, just how many credit cards are out there. They continue to grow their credit card base as well. So significant growth across the company. So, what were the two or three main points the executive were trying to make? Well, based upon it, you think about that growth perspective, one of the key messages that they communicate is strong financial and operational performance. Now, this is a common, if you've been on the calls with me, this is a common expression a lot of companies want to share. You got your analysts on, you got investors on. You want to show some real health, some real confidence. Even when companies are struggling, they'll talk about, hey, we reinvested, we divested, we restructured, and now we are ready to grow. So there's always an emphasis on kind of the strong financial operational performance. That's where jumping to the next tool, the Navigate Financial tool, allows you to say, is what they're saying really happening? Can I see it in the numbers? But definitely looking both at what they said and the numbers, it's accurate. And they emphasize very strong growth in the company, great operational performance. The fact that they're increasing their margins is a positive, right? If my revenue is going up about, say, 10.5 to 11%, the actual GAAP numbers, and I'm getting about 12% growth in my profitability, what that tells me is I'm managing my expenses and really driving some great operational performance. So increased payments, cross-border volumes were some of the outcomes, some of the things we already talked about earlier. Some other key messages, kind of the strategic innovation, a lot of conversations around kind of this account-to-account approach. So rather than just credit card being a transaction tool we tap, we use with the credit cards, but actually, how can I go directly to the account? So rather than having to put your checking or savings account on a direct account, you're able to do a Visa account. So that account-to-account payments, their acquisition of feature space talks about AI, how AI is driving their industry. One of the things they talked about is they're using it from an operational capability, helping them internally to drive success of the business. But they're also incorporating AI from a security perspective. Their acquisition of feature space is all about trying to immediately detect any sort of fraudulent behavior. In the old days, how many remember when you'd be international, you forgot to call your bank, and all of a sudden they freeze your account when you're in Europe because you forgot to tell them you were there? Well, if they've gotten a lot better, you often don't have to communicate to them before you travel. But imagine in the moment to be able to use AI to predict whether this is a legitimate or a not legitimate transaction. That's one of the things they talked a little bit about as kind of strategic innovation. And then global expansion. As you think of them, they are huge. They're global. Anywhere you want to be is their tagline. They continue to add new banks, new financial institutions, new merchants to their repertoire to have that ability to transact within their ecosystem. So Visa shares updates on expanding merchant acceptance points globally, significant partnership showing its effort to deepen its international footprint, continue to expand that way. So what are their goals and trends going forward? Well, one of the big emphasis was that innovation, the B2B payment, Visa Direct, account to account, really seeing a great opportunity to get in a whole new market for them with this innovative products they have. Grow value-added services, proportion of revenue from consulting, risk management, AI-driven fraud prevention tools. And then enhance that ecosystem, pursue a network strategy, including partnerships with fintech and leverage their AI. And then getting as much value back to their investors. In fact, one of the things they highlighted, of course, it's an earnings call. They talked about their free cash flow, how much is going to go back into capital projects, but everything else they're going to return to shareholders in the form of dividends and or stock buybacks. So real emphasis on getting that value back to shareholders. So that's kind of what they communicate. What do we know? Huge growth, a lot of innovation, kind of this value. They've got their core transactional business, but new value add as well as new flow systems is a big emphasis of where they're looking to expand and continue to enhance their ecosystem, that network of network type strategy. So what did the analysts kind of say? Well, there was a question around regulators. Now, their CEO just spent maybe 20 seconds talking about this issue. So the DOJ, Department of Justice in the United States, are going after them for an anti-competitive practices, particularly around debit network. As I look at it, it would be interesting to do a poll here. How many of us have debit cards that are Visa? You'll see Visa on your debit card. Actually, just put in the chat box. Give me a thumbs up if you got a Visa debit card. We'll see what portion of our group has a Visa. So they have a large market share of it. And so DOJ is going after them saying, hey, look, Kind of anti-monopolistic kind of practices. Now, of course, their communication to the market is, look, there's nothing in this. This is they're not informed enough, etc. There's an act. It's called the Sherman Act, which prohibits monopolistic practices. So that's what the DOJ is going after from. It reminds me of like years ago with Microsoft. Microsoft had so much control over the computer market. So all these governments went after them. Still today, they own 85% of the market. So Visa definitely has a big play in the debit market. So going after them for that practice. Of course, they say there's nothing there, but analysts were like, okay, what's really going to happen here? Is there going to be some sort of settlement type issue? How's that going to impact their financial performance? Is it going to impact how much they can build that ecosystem, the network ecosystem? Sorry. Macroeconomic sensitivity, as we see here in North America, for example, we're seeing interest rates changing. And so trying to reduce interest rates, how's that going to impact the transactions? It's going to increase, decrease. So kind of a macroeconomic sensitivity, concerns regarding the impact of economic headwinds across border transaction growth, particularly in Asia Pacific. So as all this macroeconomic factors are impacting the world, how does that play out in the transactions with Visa? As geopolitical issues, as you think about wars in Ukraine and Israel, the Asia Pacific challenges with China getting stuff ramped up post-COVID and other issues are going on there, how that's going to impact their business. Now, one of the things both of their CFO and CFO kind of communicate is, look, we're not economists. We can't predict that. So we're assuming we'll have relatively the same kind of economic factors impacting us in 2025 as we do today. So that was their answer, but there's real questions around that from analysts. And then finally, kind of competition in new flows, clarity around Visa's differentiation. How are you different from the other groups? How are you setting yourself apart? And even describe stuff like Walmart, some of the things Walmart's doing, Apple coming out with their own version of a credit card, some of those factors, how it's impacting their business. So what do we know? High growth, great numbers, great economic forecast for the company. And you can see it in what they've communicated. Well, let's go assess it in the numbers. Can I see in the number what's going on? Well, that's the second tool you get in the package that we're going to give you. The tool is called the Navigating the Financial tool. For those of you who've been in our class, you'll be familiar with this. On the left-hand side, you have the 5 drivers: cash, profit, assets, growth, and people. Now, what you see right next to it, the most common metrics any company would look at. Now, you may want to go into Visa's communication and grab some of their key metrics. For example, operating income is a metric they communicate. You may want to pull that out and run a number there around profit using operating income. But what we're going to give you is the most common metrics any company. So you can look at any company and you'd be very comfortable using this tool to assess their financial performance. And then to be able to say, what they're saying actually happening in the numbers they communicate? So you have the 5 drivers. You then have the key metrics. Right next to that, you have where to go in the financial statements. Now, those of you who've been through our classes, if you went to the 2-day, you had a pretty good deep dive around the financial statements. I know it may have been a while and you may have forgotten that. Don't worry. Right here, it tells you where to go to it. If you've never been in an accounting class, don't worry. Right here, it will tell you where to go to find those numbers. Now, if there is some sort of calculation, it will also provide how to calculate the number as well. Now, you'll notice in the first 4, you don't calculate anything. You just find the numbers and plug them in. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to walk through this with you. And in the chat box, you help me see if we can fill out the first 5 calculations here. Okay. So here's what we're going to look for. So the first number I want to look for is I want to get my cash and cash equivalent. The line item I'm looking at has the same name, exact same term. Cash and cash equivalent right here is what we're looking for. So based upon my tool, what statement should I look at? Just get a couple of you in the chat box. Let's engage with me if you would. What statement do we need to go? If I want to know a company's cash and cash equivalents, what statement do I want to go to? Excellent. Alexis, Nicole, everybody here. So we're going to go to that. Now, you don't have them, so I'll give them to you right here. Here's the balance sheet. So I've got Visa's consolidated balance sheet. It's for their full year. They end September 30th here. So I'm looking for cash and cash equivalents. Now, if you went to our class, you'd remember that the balance sheet is listed by those things that are most liquid at the top down to least liquid at the bottom. So the most liquid is going to be towards the top. In the chat box, tell me, what is the cash and cash equivalent for Visa as of September 30th, 2024? Put in the chat box. Let's get at least 2 of you in there. Make sure we get it. Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we got 11. Now it's in millions. So you got actually 11 billion, 974.5 million. Almost about $12 billion of cash and cash equivalent. So I come right back here, plug it in. I got my 11.9 billion. Now, if I want to look at it in a little more detail, I'll see that it actually is down a little bit. Well, if I want to see what happened to my cash, I'd go to that cash flow statement. I can see how much investments, where they deployed that cash, etc. We don't have time to go through that whole thing, but let's get the cash flow number. The cash flow number is the second number we're going to look at. Based on my tool, what statement do I need to go to find my cash flow number? Put in the chat box. Again, just want to make sure we're comfortable using the tool. Thank you, everybody, for jumping in there. Okay, so let's jump here. I'm looking for, it's in the cash from operation, but the line I'm looking for is called net cash provided by operating activities, right here. This is a line item. Now, for those who have been through our class, you'll remember a positive number means cash coming in or cash being generated. A negative number means cash going out. So this is their cash flow number. We call it cash from operations. Put in the chat box. In 2024, for the whole year, how much cash did they generate from their core operation? Now, just to remind you, this is the difference between all the cash that came in 1 year period of time, minus all the cash that goes out in that same year period of time. Put in the chat box. Excellent, right here. Now, the question is, what do you want that to do? Well, you want that to go up every month, every quarter, every year, and you absolutely want that to be positive. Every month, every quarter, every year. And you'll see that. A little bit of a dip year over year, but still really strong, really strong. Remember, they brought in $36 billion of revenue. They generated almost $20 billion in cash. Pretty significant number there. Okay, so let's put that in. We've got that second number right there, 19.95 million. So 19.95 billion. Okay, well, let's go down here. We're going to the profit. I want to get my total revenue. I'm get my total net income. Why am I getting them? Because eventually I'm going to calculate that. So let's get those first two numbers. Based on my tool, what statement do I need to go to one last time on the statements? Make sure we're clear. It's the one we haven't looked at yet. Eduardo, absolutely. Sometimes referred to as the P&L, statement of income, statement of operations, etc. Income statement. There you go. Here you go. We call it a statement of operation. This is our P&L for Visa right here. Okay, so the numbers I was wanting to get, I want to get their revenue. They call it net revenue. So right here's their net revenue. So right there. And then I've got to get their net income number. Go ahead and put both of those in the chat box. So I want total revenue and net income. Maria got, let's see. Yeah, we got Geraldo's given us the both of those. See if we can confirm that with at least a few others. Yep, we got 35,926. Excellent. We've got it. Okay. So I'm going to plug in my 35,92. Oh, I didn't want that to calculate. It already calculated. Darn it. I got to fix that for next time. Here's that number, 35,926. Here's the net income number, 19,743. So I'm going to take my calculation. I take my net income, divide by total revenue. Just grab your $1,000 calculator and see if you can get this same number. Give me a thumbs up in your reactions. You can do a little reaction. Thumbs up if you get that same number. For every $100 they brought into their company in 2024, they generated $55 of profit. Give me a thumbs up if you got that calculation. Anybody else get it? You got to double check my numbers. Every once in a while I miss. Let me get that number. Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Excellent. Yeah, 50. That's about S&P 500 in 2023. So the last full year, calendar year, it was about 11.5 to 12% is kind of where it was. Now we're 9 months into this fiscal year, so 2024. That's their last 3 quarters at Visa. So we'll have to see what the year-end numbers look like. But that's still, we're looking at, 4 to 5 times that profitability of the S&P 500. Pretty strong numbers as you look at a Visa calculation. Well, we don't have time to go through the rest, but here's the rest of them filled out. Now, so that's great. I got the numbers and I can see the numbers now, but the question always comes, is that good or bad? Well, what you typically want to do is do a comparison. Look at the prior year. Now, because it's full year 2024, I can go back to 2023 and get those numbers. Here they are. So you'll look at a few things. First thing, I see my cash went down a little bit. Now, some people might look at that and say, well, is that good or bad? Well, it depends on where that cash went. If the DOJ eventually gets a settlement against Visa and they're charged, a few $1,000,000, well, that's not a good use of that cash. But that cash goes into an acquisition of Feature. What was it? Feature. Anybody remember what the name of it was? Like Feature Corp, Feature. I forgot the name already. Sorry. Anyways, if that's where I'm acquiring a AI capable technology that helps me to get immediate information when I've got, illegal acts, fraudulent acts going on. I still can't see it here. What is it? Excellent. Feature Space. Thank you, Hamad. Thank you. Yeah. So if that cash goes out to make an acquisition of Feature Space, that's a great acquisition, right? So you'd have to go back and look at that. But you look at pretty flat on our cash, but look at profitability numbers. For every $100 they brought in their company, they got 55 and 24 versus only 53. Only. That's actually a great number. Excellent number. One of the higher numbers you'll see. But very good number, but improvement. So you're seeing growth numbers. So on top of 11.4% growth in 2023, we did another 10% on top of that. We continue to see great numbers across the board in the company. So not only are we seeing growth as they described in their call, but I can actually see in the numbers. You absolutely are seeing growth across the board on their margins as well as their profitability numbers. Well, folks, that's the analysis. What do I know? Strong quarter, strong year. Great financial numbers, and I can see in their numbers. And I keep score. I can see, yeah, it's legit. What they're saying is actually happening. I can see it in their numbers. So last step is, okay, so what am I going to do about it? Now, folks, if I got you inspired enough to say, hey, I think I can do this, that's great. But if you don't do anything with it, I wasted your time. So this is probably the most important part of this. Once you go through that calculation, you got to then say, what am I going to do about it? So here at Acumen Learning, having a great opportunity to work with 34 of the Fortune 50, the core of any learning experience is to do something with it. We had an opportunity where one of our customers, unbeknownst to us, got a third-party company say, what's the return? What's the benefit people get from understanding their business by building their business acumen? And Acumen Learning supported that. Here's what they said. 84% of us said that they found that they improved the performance of the business and function. As I said earlier, it builds your credibility, it'll build your career, and it'll build this company. 81% of them said that it increased collaboration, your ability to kind of work across functions, get greater execution. 77%, it put them in a better position to articulate, to communicate upline around what they could do to drive the success of the organization. Obviously, this is a huge one today in corporate America, where we get 70% of employees are disengaged. That's a stat. That's not my stat. That's a Gallup stat that they did for their 2024 engagement survey. But people who understand your business and are able to see how they fit in the business, it increases their engagement. 75% said it increased their business focus and 84% improved teamwork. Well, folks, that's what this will do for you. If you take these tools in the next 2 or 3 quarters, engage with your company. If you're not publicly traded, but you sell into a publicly traded company, you take these 2 tools and do this assessment, you absolutely will build your credibility, you'll build your career, and you'll build your company. So the wrap up for the last stage of the tool is to apply it. How would you apply it? And there's 3 things you walk away from. Number 1, what were the new insights you gained? What are you going to do about it? And then who are you going to talk about is how this form works. So here's some of the things that stood out to me. I continue to be amazed at the value of their brand and their profit metrics. There's some of the best out there. For those of you who were with us with Saudi Aramco, you had some great numbers, 26, 27% net profit margin. Saudi Aramco, off the chart numbers, generating great profitability. These guys are getting 2 times that net profit number. The amount of renew and new contract wins with their brand reputation, I can't imagine. It's interesting to see like how an Apple credit card and some of these others that are coming out, how they're going to play in the arena of electronic e-commerce type stuff. Their brand is so reputable that everybody wants to transact and use that brand of Visa. Probably the only one that would be kind of comparable in my mind would be MasterCard. But just continue to have great renewal and new contract wins. Focus on growth across payment flows, volumes, cross-border. That was interesting to me. I always just think about that transaction they do, but all these other value-added services that they're creating were new to me. Big digital and contactless options, leverage global and regional opportunities with growth. Huge emphasis on growth across the board. So what would I do about it? Now, if I was an employee, I'd go back and I'd really look at how can I drive growth? What am I doing to help with some of these new value-added products? How do I make sure others know about those value-added products, et cetera, would be things I might do. But as a consultant facilitator, here's the things that I want to look at. I want to go back and look at them. It's been a while since I looked at MasterCard, see where they're at. MasterCard usually is a little bigger in revenue gen, but about the same metrics, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but love to see where they're at. Share this findings with my clients, my consultants. How do you think about that industry and how does it impact all the other industries, retail spaces, consumer products, etc. The last thing, if you're part of Visa, man, we'd love to work with you. If you happen to somehow find this through the electronic communication we have, reach out to us. We'd love to help build your credibility, build your career, and build your company. What we find is employees that really get this stuff, they really differentiate themselves and really help drive the organization. So we'd love to work with Visa. If you're out there, please reach out to us. The last part of this is then to step back and say, okay, who am I going to communicate? Once I've picked what I'm going to do about this, if I work for Visa, here's the 3 things I'm going to do. Well, sit down with your manager. If you work with Visa, sit down with your manager and talk about what is it you can do. Make sure that you're aligned. What you're seeing is actually what your manager would expect you to do. If you look at a customer or partner, how would you use this information to be able to create a stronger partnership with that customer? Or if you're looking at a competitor, how can we differentiate ourselves? Go talk to your marketing, your go-to-market strategies, and figure out how you can really take this information and use it. Well, folks, that's the tool. So the last stage is to apply. Well, going back to that initial prepared phase, this tool becomes your reviewed your notes. Once you've done it one quarter, the next quarter, before you jump in to listen to the call, do a quick review. What did they say they were going to do? Okay, now I listen to it and I say, okay, did they say what they said? Did they do what they said they were going to do? Can I see it in the numbers, etc.? So that's the tool, folks. Well, here's my last question. So who are you going to analyze? We just put in the chat box the tool. So reach out, get access to the tool. Is it a company you're going to work for that you're currently working for? Is it a company you're going to sell to? A company you want to compete against, partner with, invest in, interested in? Or are you going to come back in about a month and jump on a call when we look at Bear? I'd invite you to come and join that, completing the tool. Let's have a better discussion around how we can impact these results. Well, folks, it's been my pleasure as we wrap up today. Here is a link in our chat box to get access to our workbook. That tool is a great resource. Our next call is going to happen on the 18th. You can actually register through this link. Plus, if you're interested in a deeper dive, hey, I've never been through a course. It's been a long time. 2 quick things. Number 1 is we give $100 off our self-paced learning. It's a nice review of the 5 drivers and the tools that we have. The second thing is if you would like us to come and do this type of assessment on your company, or maybe you want to do a deep dive, build your team or your company's business acumen, please reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to follow up and help build your credibility, build your career, and build your company. Folks, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. See you in about a month. Thank you much. Have a great day. Any questions that we missed, team? We need to go back to. Folks, in the chat box again, we've got that link. If you want to download that tool, if you want to reach out to us, love to talk and help you in any way we can. Doing earnings calls, getting access to the self-paced learning or other modules we can make available to you. By the way, one of the new modules we have is the T3 option. If you're interested in getting certified, let us know. We'd love to show you how to get certified to teach this in your company. Well, folks, thank you very much for your time. We're going to go ahead and close it down. Look to see you next month. Thank you much. Have a great day.